And I'm just waiting for it to say live. All right. Hello, everybody. I'm here with Rod Gill, and we will be talking about Introduction to Project VBA, how to boost your productivity. So go ahead, Rob. Take it away.
Hi. Introduction to Project VBA, how to boost your productivity. My name is Rod Gill, MVP for projects. Thank you to our sponsors. Couldn't do this all without them. So, quick bit about me. Only got a few quick PowerPoint slides, and I'm going to get straight into demoing code. Been a Microsoft project MVP for way too many years, but basically I'm a professional planner, so I use projects a lot, and I use VBA a lot to automate reports, add extra functionality, and do all sorts of things. More importantly, I've written the only book on Project VBA, VBA program for Microsoft Office projects. And I regularly develop macros for organizations around the world. So the key benefits of Project VBA, and it's basically around adding new functionality, custom reports, or doing a recalculate of assignment units, automating repetitive processes, etc. All of these add dramatically to your productivity, especially large, complex projects with lots of data that needs manipulating, reporting on. VBA is a phenomenally powerful tool. So the main advantages of VBA, you can read these very much, but what I really love is the ability to use VBA to control other applications. So I will often tie projects, Excel, and SQL Server together in one very powerful solution, just using a bit of VBA to glue the whole lot together. It's a very quick development environment, and what I love about it is it's not a technical language. It's very easy for people to pick up. You don't have to be a professional developer at all. Disadvantages, though, we've got quite a few solutions out there that are very hard and expensive to maintain if you don't get yourself up to speed with some reasonable standards. It's not easy to deploy VBA to a lot of people, especially if you want complex forms. Then you probably need to go to the Visual Studio for Office, Visto, rather than VBA. Do need to know it's not supporting Office Mobile or the web-based version of Office 365. And there are some conversion problems, but they are workable. You can get around those. We definitely don't have to teach you how to develop in VBA. So what I'm going to do is show you 3 examples from simple to more complex. And I hope through that and explaining how I come around to develop the solutions will whet your appetite and get you into what is a fantastic tool for skilled users. Turns you into a guru. You may need to be on a PC with good download speed, up to 720 resolution, to be able to read the code properly, but this presentation will be available soon, so if you're not on a suitable bandwidth right now, then you can catch up with this later. The first macro I want to demonstrate is a simple example, but it's still one that I've had to do in a place. Is loop through all tasks. Help me explain and demo a few basic things about VBA though. In the adding functionality side of things, Project 2010 introduced a rather nice little thing which assignment units don't recalculate problem. Well, they do recalculate, they simply don't display the latest value. I find that really annoying, and I hate seeing wrong data being displayed. I've got a macro that solves that. Oh, by the way, it's a freebie you can download. Then the big one I want to demonstrate, this is the one I'll spend most time on, is consolidating multiple projects. It's a problem that comes up in the forums a lot, and have I got a solution for you? What I'm going to demonstrate is actually a down solution because it's too big and too much to show in one short session. So you can get my VBA book from Amazon, free code at that web address there, and you can email me at the email address at the bottom. So let's go straight to Microsoft Projects. And this is the format summary macro. So I've got a very simple little schedule here. Obviously, it doesn't do anything at all. And all I want to do is format level 1 summary tasks. So this is a good example where what we've got is simple VBA, but it's simple only if you know project well. For example, you need to know that we've got an outline level field in projects, and that tells me what the high level tasks are. So top level tasks are all outline level equals 1. So all my VBA code needs to do is loop through all tasks and only look at outline level 1 tasks. That makes it quite easy. But let's actually go and have a look at some of the code. This is a very short, simple macro. But when I write macros, what I tend to do is write the comments first. So the comments are these green lines with a single quote starting. A single quote at the beginning of a line says the comments follows the rest of this. So I write the comment lines, save current active task ID, then select the task and set background color, make originally selected task active. So I basically scope or describe what I want this macro to do. And what it does is it breaks the macro down into nice bite-sized chunks that I can then code. And I do one bit at a time, get that working, then test it, get the next bit working, and so on. Makes it a much easier process to develop it. You also notice that I've indented the code at different places. So that means for each, there's a nice loop there, and there's a test there, another test here. Everything's indented, so it makes the code easy to understand and therefore find out any problems later on. So let's just quickly go through some of these things here. These tasks here at the top, starting with the word dim is short for dimension. Basically, we're creating little sort of pigeonholes, if you like, where we can store data. So original task ID, I'm going to record the original task ID where the cursor is at the beginning of the macro, because I actually have to move the cursor to be able to format colors. Unfortunately, with VBA, for this particular feature, you need to select cells to change their color. So I'm going to record the current ID, so at the end of the macro, I can go back to the original task ID, so I've left things exactly as they were after running the macro. Now, here's a classic example of what I mean by VBA being a nice, relatively high-level, easy-to-understand language. So I've got this variable called TSK, task. I like to just remove vowels from standard words to create good task variable names. So for each task, that's doing exactly what it looks like. I'm going to loop and look at every single task in the active project. So it's not a particular project, it's the active project. So this code will work on any active project. If not, Tusk is nothing. Some people have a habit of leaving blank rows in schedules. And a blank row is a nothing task. If you try to work on it, you'll get all sorts of errors thrown up. So we need to trap all rows that are blank or nothing. So if Tusk is not nothing, then we'll drop down and do this code. So when I get down to here, I'm in an active project and I found a valid task. So if Tusk.summary, what's called a flag, it's true if the active or the task is a summary task, false if it isn't. So if it is a task summary and task.outline level equals 1, then drop down and do the rest of it. So you think, okay, how am I going to remember all of this stuff? Task dot, and this is IntelliSense, Microsoft calls it. Basically, when you press a full stop, you'll get a list of all of the possible options for what you're doing. So I want outline alpha level. Yes, there we go. equals 1. So you don't have to memorize all of these words. You don't have to know it. You do need to know project fairly well, because that'll give you big clues about what's the name of the fields you've got to find and things like that. But otherwise, writing the code is very simple compared to C#, JScript, etc., or JavaScript, sorry. So we finally get down to these two rows. Only if it's a valid task. It is a summary task, and the outline level is 1. So the first one simply selects the row, and it's the task ID number, which is the row down the left-hand side of the Gantt chart. And row relative means we're not going to jump down a certain number of rows. We're going to jump to that specific row. And then here's a bit of, you do need to know about font 32X. I won't go into the history behind that name. And set a cell color with an RGB value that you can pull off project. So I can just go for broke and run this code, or function key F8. I can just quickly, the yellow task or the yellow highlight shows which is the next active cell. I can go through each of them, and I can hover my mouse over the ones here. So yes, task summary is true, and outline level is 1. Oh yes, I found a task already. F8 again, and like that. And I can keep going through, and I can change the code and keep single stepping, or I can go up and press F5 or click this continue button, and it's now run through and finished the rest of the macro. So what has that actually done? If I Alt Tab back to project, time for your screens to refresh, and you should see that summary 1 and summary 4 are all nicely highlighted in green. So obviously not a big deal for a small project, but for a large project, that's nice. And sure, you can do it manually, but quite likely this sub that I've developed is one that will be called by a bigger macro that does a lot more work to prepare views for printing, etc., etc. So this can either be a standalone little solution, or more likely it will get called from a bigger piece. So that's the first macro. Very straightforward, very simple. The assignment units reset macro. When Project 2010 came out, people had problems in 2007 in that when they updated tasks from timesheets and so on, the peak units could get unrealistically high. That's because people are forgetting that the units field is peak units. It's not average units or anything like that. It's peak units. So they threw the baby out with the bathwater. They basically said, okay, we'll solve this. We won't update the units field once you do it. But that's a problem. If I got this task here, T2, it's got a duration of 4 days. You look at the form in the bottom, and it's probably too small for you to read, but I can't change the forms here. Basically, this says resource is the resource name, units are 25%, work is 8 hours. So if I now change the work to be 16 hours, and I've got a fixed duration, fix one of the things, edit one of them, the third one gets recalculated. When I click OK, the units should change to 50%. But it hasn't. It's stayed on 25%. And that's the problem. I just don't like seeing that. I would like units as being the units required to complete the task. So if we've got a task that's 50% complete, like T1, then I'd like to see the units calculated for finishing the remaining duration of the task. So I'd like to see units being remaining work divided by remaining duration. Now, for resource manager or project manager, that is useful value. I don't think any other units is of any particular use. Certainly, the original units entered months ago, and there may well have been a whole series of changes since then. Totally useless. So I've got this free solution you can download from my website, and it looks like this. I call this refresh units module from the project before save event, and that does it here. This is what gets called by the event. It runs refresh units, and it passes the project that's being saved. Or I can run this refresh units active project sub, and that runs refresh units with the active project. So ignoring that for now, I'm just going to come down to refresh units, and notice it's being passed PJ as project, the actual project. Now PJ represents and can access all of the data for the particular project we're being passed. And we've got various names here: task, assignment, remaining duration, remaining unit, start date, task type, and work. I like to give my variable names meaningful names. That self-documents the code in a lot of ways. So on error resume next, this basically starts some error handling. Don't have time to discuss that now, but it basically lets the macro handle errors cleanly. Firstly, I'm going to check the application.version. So I wrote this code for 14 thing. Unfortunately, Project 2016 also has this same problem. They haven't fixed it. Even though I got down on my knees to the program manager after the project conference a couple of years ago. So I'll basically say from now, basically, if it's Project 2007 or earlier, we just display this message: this macro is only useful for Project 2010 or later. So macro will end. If it is Project 2010 or later, then we'll drop down to here and undo transaction. By running this, what it means is that I can undo in one go everything the macro does. So after I've run the macro, you'll see in the undo list, reset assignment units, you can undo everything that's been done. So I like to do that for my macros. It makes it very clean to undo things if the macro went horribly wrong. So next is for each task in pj.tasks. So instead of active project.tasks, it's pj.tasks, because pj, pointing to project that we want to work with, gives me access to all of the tasks and from there all of the data. So this is the loop again. It's going to go all the way around once for every task. And again, next row down, if not task is nothing, I'm checking for blank rows. Now then, I only want to adjust units for auto tasks, not manual tasks. Incomplete tasks, so I'm not going to touch completed tasks. I'm not going to touch summary tasks, and I'm going to ignore inactive tasks. So this is where we start to see how we handle this. If task.% work complete is less than 100, and it's not a summary, and the task is active, and then in the next row, and not task manual, the space underscore at the end of this row means that this row is all one long one. But I prefer not to have too much width for my code, because then I'll have to be in full screen all the time and I can't see the project. So if all of those things are true, it's not completed, normal task, it's not a manual one, then I'm going to go to task type equals task.type. I'm going to force the task type to be fixed duration so I can get the units calculated properly, and I therefore want to be able to restore the same task type when I finish with this task. So I'm storing the task type so I can use it later to restore the original type. Got to be friendly with these things. You don't want to leave things all in unexpected things. So let me just scroll up a bit here. Let your screen refresh. Now what we're going to do, so this is all code being run for every task. For each assign in task.assignments, I'm going to look at each individual assignment. Now, an assignment is a resource on a task, and a resource could be a cost resource or a material resource or a work resource. So firstly, we're only going to change work resources. We're going to ignore materials and ignore cost resources. So if assign resource type equals pj resource type work, and that's a complicated but pj resource type work, you can get that from help. It's not difficult. You click on type, press F1 for help, and pj resource type work. Yes, we're ignoring material and cost resources. Now, we've only come to here if the task % work complete is less than 100. But some assignments may finish early. So an assignment may be complete even though the task isn't. So I'm only going to be working with incomplete assignments. So again, I'm doing a check here. Assign.% work complete is less than 100. So we're testing for that. If the assignment is partially complete, then for me to be able to calculate remaining work divided by remaining duration, the duration I want to work with is just the remaining duration for the assignment. So in this case, I want to know what the start date is, and I'm going to use as the start date task.resume. This is again where you need to know project fairly well. The resume date in project is the date a task or an assignment will resume when it's partially complete or split or anything like that. So have a look at the resume column. You can insert it into the Gantt chart, and it can be useful data sometimes. And by doing CDate, I'm just forcing it to be a date, just to play safe. If the task hasn't started, then the start date I'm going to use is the assignment start date. Because remember, assignments don't have to start at the same time as the task. So I've got to handle all of these little scenarios as well. And I'll just read work equals assignment.work. Don't have to do this, but it keeps it nice and simple. Now, when you've got resources on tasks, you can choose to ignore resource calendars and just use a task calendar. So for example, if you want a task to only run at weekends, you can create a weekends only calendar and assign that calendar to the task, but you have to say, but ignore resource calendars. So here is where I need to look at calendars, because when I calculate the remaining duration or get Project to do it for me, I need to take into account non-working time like weekends, etc., etc. So if we've got ignore resource calendar set, then I need to use the base project calendar. Otherwise, I'm just going to use the assignment resource calendar. So here's where I calculate remaining duration. Date differences is a nice method available within Project VBA, and using two dates in the calendar, it returns the number of working minutes between those two dates. So if the remaining duration is greater than 0, I'm only going to change the units if I need to that are already there. Are they the same as the calculated remaining units? And I'm rounding here to 2 decimal places, because if the calculation goes to 10, Project only stores to 2 decimal places in the background. So I make sure I round to only 2 decimal places so I get a fair comparison. So if assignment units is not, that's what these 2 little signs here say. If assignment units is not equal to remaining units, then I go through and change the units to be that, and I force work to be the correct value again. Remember, I set the task type to fixed duration, so we might have got some change in work. I just want to force it to be the original again. And we drop out of all of these if statements, out of the next assignment loop, and I restore the original task type, and then that's the end of the task loop, dropping out, and that's it, done. So remember, I changed the work for that task from 8 to 16 hours of work, and units stayed at 25%. So I'm just going to click on the go to refresh units active projects and run it. And if I go back to projects, what I can see here, or you may not be able to with the resolution, units has now been changed to 50%, which is what it should be in my book. That is the remaining work divided by remaining duration. So this task hasn't started, so remaining work 16 hours, duration is 4 days, 8-hour days, 4 8 32, 16 divided by 32, 50%. So this macro is available for you to download from my website. It's a freebie. Definitely didn't like what Microsoft had done with this, so I thought, well, I can do something about it. I've just given it free to people because I believe this is something that should be changed. Yeah. So that's this macro. I'm now going to the third and final macro I want to talk to you about. This one's called Consolidate Projects. In the Microsoft Project forums, I regularly see people who are doing consolidations with links, because what they want to see is an overview of all of their projects, especially if they've got a program of projects, and then they want to see the resource workload across all those projects, so then they have to create a resource pool as well. So each project is now linked to a master file and to a resource pool. Unfortunately, linking uses the very old Windows technology called DDE, Dynamic Data Exchange. If you ever overwrite any of the file names, rename them, or move them to a different folder, or have the files stored on a disk drive that isn't physically in your building, so they're on a remote server or worse still in the cloud, then every time you do that, the file corruption dice roll. It's not if, it's when. Now, it might be 1 week or it might be 2 or 3 years, depending on how lucky you are, how careful you are, but file corruption will arrive sooner or later. So my preference is always for, when inserting a project, turning off the link option. So you go to projects, insert sub projects, and it's this link to project option. I would always turn this off. So I'll just leave that there for a few seconds so your screens can refresh. So I'd always have that link to project turned off. So what I do when I've got a program of projects, I create a fresh consolidation every week with the link off always. Because what that does is it copies all data. But if it copies all data, it also has to copy the resource data, and so that automatically consolidates resource information. Rodgill in one project will be consolidated with information from Rodgill in another project, and we end up with a beautiful resource reporting tool. However, if you've got 7 or 8 or more projects, it's a bit of a pain creating that every week. So this is a macro that does this. But wait, there's more. Because we also have the problem of inter-project links. People will often create master files so they can link tasks between projects. Now that creates yet another dynamic data exchange link, which is yet another roll of the file corruption dice whenever you've overwritten, moved, etc. So what this solution does is it actually allows you to link between files in a consolidation, but that link is only in the master file snapshot. So what I've got here is a single project called Consolidate Projects, and in it I've got a folder and I've got a file name. I've got 3 demo files called Miss Piggy 1, Miss Piggy 2, Miss Piggy 3. Miss Piggy is a classic sort of file I use for demonstrating in training. But notice I've got Miss Piggy asterisk, and an asterisk is a wildcard. So Miss Piggy asterisk is going to find Miss Piggy 1, Miss Piggy 2, Miss Piggy 3, and consolidate all of the Miss Piggy files from that folder. Now, my full macro also does things like allow you to put individual file names in there, or the root of that name. So if you've had date codes at the end, it will find the newest date version of all of the files. But I'm simplifying what I want to show you to make it easier for you to understand. I've cut a lot of the code away, and I'm only looking at the part of the solution that says consolidate automatically all of the projects that match this file name and wildcard in that particular folder. Let's run it and see what happens. And go to Project Reporter, because what this solution has also done is it's brought up a new tab, and here's the run consolidate, and it runs it. Oh, there we go. And let me just open this up a little bit. I'll go to Formats and Text Styles and 12 and OK. I don't need that horrible task mode. I've got that there. Well, no, let's just bring that to here. That'll do. And done. So what I've now created is a consolidated file. It's got all of the 3 Miss Piggy files, and we can see what we need to note here is the project's finishing just in the 2nd week of February 2016. So the program's finishing, all of these programs. Now, that's the consolidated project, and that looks Great. But we can see we've got hyperlinks to all of these projects as well here. So I can click on these individual files and go and have a look at them. I can click on here, obviously, and expand the projects. And I can see all the different files going through. So let's actually now go and have a look. I'll just shut down this project because we can create it really easy. Oh, and notice that when I'm back to here, what the code has done is it's displayed all of the files that it's found that matches Miss Piggy asterisk. And I've got a table here that shows the hyperlink column because that wasn't there before. And I've got all of the Miss Piggy files. And again, if I click on that, it'll open up Miss Piggy 2 and I'm there straight away. Now remember, the third project finished in the second week of February in the consolidation. But notice here, it's actually put the durations of the individual projects. And these projects are actually showing that I'm finishing mid-January, mid to late January. What's the difference? The difference is that these projects here, if I look across all three projects, I've got a developer in here that's over allocated. And the last task of the developer to the first task of the developer in Miss Piggy 2 and the last task for Miss Piggy 2 into Miss Piggy 3, and consolidation shows a more realistic finish date given my resource availability. So I need to go into these projects and update when I can start the developer work to get them to the right dates. So this is a semi-automated, semi-manual process for handling a program of projects. But let's just go through first and have a look at this code. What I've got at the top is some variables. So these are declared above the subroutine. Now that means that they are visible and can be used in all of the subroutines in this particular module. So that's a technical item, don't worry about it. So the first thing I've got in here, oh, classic old on error resume next, but set macro proj equals active project. I've got the macro project that we've seen there that gives me all my files, and I'm going to open up a consolidated project. So I'm going to be working with two different project files. So I need to create a variable to point to the active project. That's called macro proj. And I'm going to create another one that's going to point to the new consolidated file. So at any time I can work with either project and copy data to and from either project very easily. Rather than have a whole long list of lot of code, I've broken it up. So I've created another sub called build project list. That builds the list of projects. That puts the Miss Piggy 1, Miss Piggy 2, Miss Piggy 3 into the macro project. And then I sort those names so that they're in a nice thing. I could sort by start date if I wanted to, or sort by anything I like. But for now, it's just sorted by name. And then I go through, and this one, set master proj equal to application.projects.add. So I'm adding another project to Microsoft Project. It's the same as creating a new blank project. And I then hide the project summary task to start with, because that simplifies things. I'll display it again at the end. And then for each task in macroproj.task. So we've seen for each task in active project, for each task in pjproj.task, same for each task in macroproj.tasks. Again, we've got to check for those nasty blank rows. That I've deleted a whole load of code, so ignore that one. Flag 1, I'm only setting that for valid projects. So for the rows where I've got Miss Piggy asterisk.mpp, that's not a valid project name, so flag 1's blank. So my code down here, I'm going to insert projects only if flag 1 is set. That's going to insert the projects. I'll make sure I'm showing all tasks. And I need to then come further down to the bottom here. And for each task in masterproj.tasks, I'm now working at all of the tasks in the master project, and I'm only going to look at outline level equals 1. So we have a problem to resolve here, because each version of projects and sometimes each individual service pack can change the way of how projects get inserted. What we want to have is each project gets inserted on the same start date as its project start date. But when I create a new master file, its project start date defaults to today's date. So I'm going to get the earliest start date of any of the sub-projects, and I'm going to therefore set the project start date for the master project to it. That helps with formatting, avoids little error messages popping up at various times and so on. So that's all that this whole loop here does. It simply finds the earliest start date of the sub-projects and sets that as the master project start date. Then I show the project summary task again, and I give it a name, consolidated program as of. Now I've got yet another routine underneath called insert project links, and I pass it the master project name, and what that will do is it will resolve all of the inter-project links. Then I jump to the top of the project, make sure that projects is set to calculate automatically, zoom the timescale so it shows the entire project on the screen, and I'm done. So when I built this code, when I came to say, well, now I'm going to need a list of all the project files, that was quite a big block. So rather than have one multi-screen long length of code, I said, right, well, that's going to be a logical block. So I just wrote the high level stuff first, and then I can come down to create the smaller stuff. So what I want to do now is quickly explain how I do the inter-project links, because I think this is the one that's probably of most interest to people. I'm going to come to here and click on the Miss Piggy 2, and it opens the right one up. This has come from direct code I've used for another client, and they had to use text 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and the whole load of others. So text 9 was it. What I've got here is the name of a task that is unique across all of the consolidated projects. So this is a constraint developer available. So task 7 developer available is a constraint, and it has a task date. I've been told 6th of November I'm going to get that developer. And in Miss Piggy Custom Project 1, I have a task like I have here at row number 28. I have developer finished Miss Piggy 2. So in Miss Piggy's Custom Project 1, I have a task 28 called developer finished Miss Piggy 1. By saying Miss Piggy, I have guaranteed unique task names across all 3 projects. So when this project is consolidated, I can say, make the predecessor of this task the task name developer finished Miss Piggy 1. And that's it. It's really easy, provided that is a valid, unique task name. It must have exactly the same spelling. So if you've got an extra space at the end, it won't work. So just copy, paste the task name, and that's it. So the VBA code can make this one here, and then it will delete the constraint date and add any deliverable date that's on it as well. So let's just quickly go through this code, single stepping through. So just going to the top here, and let's see how much of this I can get in. So, yep, let's go F8. So I'm just grabbing the active view, applying the consolidation macro so I can see all the hyperlinks and build project lists. So I'm not going to go into that. I'm just going to go over it. And if I go to Microsoft Projects, that's what's automatically created or added a task for Miss Piggy 1, a task for Miss Piggy 2, and ditto for Miss Piggy 3. At this stage, the task durations and start dates will be inaccurate. And if go back to the code, going over, and I'm going to come through, and there, insert So if I go back to projects, we've now had a new, I'll just quickly while I'm here, make this more visible for you. So we've now inserted the first project. It's in there already. Go back to the code. And I can just keep going through Miss Piggy 2, Miss Piggy 3, and the code's now dropped through. So at this stage, we have a new consolidated project file. We've inserted all of the projects, and we can now come on down. And here's where we're going to just go through and look for all of the tasks. And so I'll just quickly do a Control F8 to take me through to into project links. So now what I've done is I've set the master project start date to be the earliest start date. And here's the into project links master project. So let's just actually go into this and have a look. So this is quite a nice small module. So I've passed the new master project in, and that's the project. That's what this project is. So this project will always work with the new master file, however many I create. And here we go for each task in proj.tasks. So what you find in VBA very quickly is you'll get a whole load of snippets of code like these loops that you use and reuse again and again and again. So 80–90% of your code is going to look very similar to previous code. Just the fine detail is often what's different. So we had text9 had the name of the predecessor we want. Now, for most tasks, text9 is blank. So this test is saying if text9 is not blank, so I'm going to put my cursor in the task underneath, Control F8, and I've gone round and round all the different tasks, and now it's suddenly stopped. This is the first task where text9 is not 0 or empty. So if I put my cursor over text9, project pops up to stop text9 equals developer finished Miss Piggy 1. So the current task, I'll make the predecessors equal proj.task Miss Piggy 1 here. So that's that code there will return, and there it shows me in the little box underneath, row 28 as the ID. Task is task 37. So task 37 will have as a predecessor 28. This now actually lets us build up a critical path right through the program of projects. I first had to write this code in detail and get it very accurate for a large SAP implementation, and they had about 7 or 8 different projects in the whole program, and they couldn't find or didn't know the critical path through to the first of 5 or 6 go live dates. So I got called in, and with this solution, which they're still running today, they were able to find out what the critical path is to all of the different go live dates by changing deliverable dates and various other things. So this simply loops through, and now that's set the link, and now it tests to make sure the link succeeded, which it did. And if it has, it sets the constraint type to as soon as possible. So any constraint date that was on it has now been removed. So this task is now only driven by the predecessor, the link to the other project. This makes sure the critical path flows through properly. And if there is a deadline, that gets copied across, and that's it. Go back to projects, and what we found is, here we go. We've got this here, and let me insert into here predecessors, and I'll expand out Miss Piggy 2. And what we'll find is task 37, developer available, has a predecessor of task 28, which is the same as task 58, developer finish Miss Piggy 2. So that's how I've resolved across a program of projects. And all that code plus some other quite complex reporting is still stuff that's been going for a year, complex SAP implementation. It's broken down the basic capabilities of projects, and with VBA to act as a bit of glue of each work for the project administrators every week. So that's the code I want to do. I think we'll just go to questions now.
Hi. Hey, Rod. You there?
Yes, can you hear me?
Yep. Just give me 1 second. Okay, right now, we don't have any questions on the discussion chat section of the page. So if you wanted to continue talking for another 5-10 minutes, you can go ahead.
Okay, so I've either it's stunned my look all the way around the world on this one, or my description was brilliant. I'll choose to accept me being brilliant discussion and description of everything. So what I'll quickly show you now is what might be quite interesting, how I generated the extra tab on the on menu code. Here we go, on the ribbon. So to create the ribbon requires some not technical XML code, but if you get one character wrong in that XML code, it doesn't work and you don't get any error messages. So especially when you're trying to create ribbons with 10, 20 icons, it is an absolute pain in the butt trying to decode all of that. But I very quickly realized, of course, that it'd be very easy to use code to build it together. And I've used a class module called class ribbon, but here's how it does it. So for that consolidate macro, I've just got a simple ribbon with one button, and here's my code to do it. So I've added to the whole interface for this class ribbon code with rib, which is the variable name I created. Oh, hang on, let me just show you how I do that. So I just go dot ribbon start new. So this is all of the different features I've got in here. So just ignore that. So I ribbon start new, tab start new. So I've created a new ribbon. Now I'm starting a tab and I'm calling it Project Reporter because I've got a whole set of macros that I'm going to be selling soon as I can get flipping store working. I've called it Project Reporter, and now I start a new group. Groups are, those thin vertical lines grouping all the icons together. So group start new, I'm calling it Consolidate, and now I add a button. Button name Consolidate. The label is Run Consolidation. Size is large. If I have normal, then I can have a much smaller button. The image. Now, Microsoft has a program you can download, and I've forgotten the name of it, which is basically an add-on to Excel, and it gives you all of the icons built into all of the Office applications. And you can use the name from any of those images in here, and that automatically defines the image that's displayed. And on action here, this is the name of the macro to run when that button's clicked. Then I add the XML code to finish the group, the XML code to finish the tab, to finish the ribbon, and show the ribbon. So for me, creating new ribbons is extremely easy. I just run all this code. And I've even got other code here that will I can either include all of this or keep things even simpler again. One of the things I can show is that, I can go read XML, and I go Control G to show the immediate window. And if I run that code, that's not the right one.
Hey, Rod.
This one hasn't got, yeah.
There was a question from Treb asking, how do you keep from creating duplicate ribbons/buttons? Do you have to do a check or does it do it for you?
Well, the ribbon gets totally refreshed each time this is run. So you swap to a different project and the ribbon gets refreshed. So you actually have to call this ribbon code from the activate event for projects so that it refreshes the ribbon. So it'll create only one button for each line I've done here. So the button code will only be once in XML. I create a fresh XML string every time this runs. If you call the ribbon code from the global.mpt activate event, the ribbon will show for all your projects. But if you call the ribbon code from a particular project, it only displays for that project. And if you have ribbon code in the project and the global file, the project one displays. So when I send someone a project file and they open it up, they will see a install tab. But when they alt tab across to another project, they'll get back to see my default project reporter. Did that answer it, Trev?
He's responding in the chat window.
All right.
Yes, if there's any more questions that the viewers would like to ask on the discussion section on the project page, you can continue to chat with Rod here himself. So,
okay, so this. Yep.
Go ahead.
Yep. So this is the ribbon code I use to build up some quite complex ribbons in minutes rather than hours, because it took me hours to get ribbons working properly to start with, and I realized what a complete waste of time that was. So with VBA, the more you use it, the more you have a collection of code in your library, if you like, that you'll find use and reuse and reuse and reuse. So it's like an evolutionary process learning VBA. Your first one's to the complex one. I think that's it, basically. If I jump into anything else, we'll go over time.
All right. Well, thank you very much, Rod. And that should end our session. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you.